Thanks everybody for joining us again. Again, this is Bill Mork with Readily. Thanks for joining this presentation today about AI and security and how local governments can make responsible choices for their communities. As we kick off things here, got some important people I'd like to introduce on the line today. One of our partners in crime here, Chris Sander, co-founder and CEO of Readily.
Hello.
Also helping us through the discussion today, Anthony Jameson, co-founder and CEO of CivStart. Anthony, good to see you again.
Hey, everyone.
Yeah, and last but not least, Russ Anima, Director in Cloud Engineering of Delinea, bringing a lot of great security and AI experience to us as well. Hey, Russ.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Let's get right into this. So a couple key points or questions that we'll try to discuss today are why do security certifications matter and which certifications should vendors meet? We'll go through the details on what those requirements are and which ones are the most important to look out for. What AI specific provisions should be included in government contracts. So now that we're in the world of AI, we go to partner with people. What are some specific things that we might want to make sure we're noting there? And with the explosion of AI, with so many different vendors, how can you tell if an AI vendor is legitimate, and how do other vendors commonly cut corners? So we'll note some things to take a look out for. And also, what practical steps can local government leaders take to protect themselves? So just jumping right into that, Anthony, what are you seeing from, oh, am I missing a slide here? There we go. Russ, what are you seeing from AI security? Is it as easy to get it as people think so? And kind of what are the aspects that should be considered when looking at AI security?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone can say, put on their webpage, they're secure. They can claim anything. But actually being secure is a very different thing. So really, how do you know if a company that you're working with is actually secure? Well, that's really where the compliance and security frameworks and attestations come in. They help you, the customer, know that the vendor you're working with is actually secure. Third-party auditors will conduct due diligence for you and ensure that the vendor is meeting a lot of the rigorous standards set by these security and privacy certifications, standards, etc. So the one thing I want to mention is security certifications are a lot of paperwork, but they're really not just about paperwork. They're really how you verify that a vendor can be trusted with your data. So a lot of customers, whether public or private, they really don't have the staff or budget to audit vendors themselves. So that's really where these certifications and attestations really help. Security from the outside and from inside threats. We're not just talking about hackers on the internet. Outside threats can include things like ransomware, phishing, credential theft. Inside threats could be employee misuse, overprivileged access, and just general plain mistakes can happen. The certifications will generally look for in test things such as access control. Access control is really does the company adhere to the principle of least privileged, meaning you only get access to what you need to do. This is a common problem that I see in startups where everyone will just have administrator privileges because that's the easy thing to do. You never run into any access issues, but it's a really bad thing. And you really, the audits will help make sure that that is not the actual case with you're working with a vendor. Audits will also look at monitoring to make sure the company is alerting on misconfigurations and security events. They'll also check for separation of duties to make sure that the person that's maybe an example could be during development. A person that's going to release software into production is not the same person that's approving the release. You want to make sure that there's separation of those duties. And these certifications also ensure that there's logging and alerting for access to systems. So most breaches, from what I've seen, aren't from elite hackers. They're usually generally stolen credentials or misconfigured systems. And this is all preventable. And these certifications and attestations really help prove that. Let's see. The next thing I wanted to mention, it was around the security scanning and testing. Certifications require continuous monitoring. It's not just a one-time thing. So regular vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, and log reviewing happens. This is really how you detect issues before they become an incident. And SOC 2 is an attestation that's a great example of something you want to look for when you plan to work with a SaaS vendor. It's an independent audit showing that a company actually operates securely, privately, and with high availability. The next item around privacy. Local governments really handle some of the most personal data people have, names, addresses, court records, etc. So certifications will test who can actually access that personal data, how the access is approved, and how data is removed and how breaches are handled. So a couple good certifications or relevant certifications or compliance standards to look for would be for HIPAA compliance, which really requires strong safeguards for health data, and then maybe GDPR compliance, which is a privacy law, ensuring that personal data is collected, used, and deleted lawfully. And then last but not least, availability. Security really isn't just about preventing breaches, it's about keeping services running as well. Cities really can't, and actually any company can't afford downtime. Certifications and compliance frameworks will look for uptime controls, backup systems, disaster recovery. And that's especially relevant for things like payment systems, permits, utilities, things that are really, you really want up 24/7. So yeah, security certifications really give you a defensible way to say, hey, we did our due diligence. We required independence validation, and we just didn't take a vendor's word for it. So really important, in my opinion.
Most definitely. Thank you, Russ. And I've seen one of the questions come through on audio as well. Just as a reminder, if you have any questions as we're going through this, please feel free to chat, and we'll try to answer them as we can. Chris, maybe if you could add on to that as the founder and the CEO of Readily, when did you decide to start applying for or making sure this was a really secure solution, and what certifications you wanted to go after?
Yeah, I mean, my background is I was a nuclear submarine officer dealing with top secret information. I think at some point I had a badge to the White House. I had the Yankee White clearance, which means you're allowed to be around the president unsupervised. Not that I was supervising the president, but I was allowed to be around him without any additional protection. State Department and so on. So, it's always been part of my background is having high level of security. And from the start, we knew that we wanted to be a very secure system. And frankly, it's also, we knew that when we start going to bigger organizations that have real, they have like specific people that are focused on security, they were going to ask us these questions, and I didn't think that it was enough that we sort of hand wave our way through like a vendor security questionnaire, that we actually are doing the right thing to protect people's data. The first thing we actually went after was, and I'll talk about the frameworks that are here and how like a city or a county should think about these. I don't think that everybody needs to have all of this, but I think everybody needs to have some of this, right? Because otherwise, I can only imagine the amount of, AI vendors out there that are just like taking a security questionnaire and just like feeding it into ChatGPT to get back responses that sound good and then submitting that to the city. So SOC 2 Type 1, what that means is you have basic policies and controls in place, that you have an HR policy, that you have a data retention policy, that you have a disaster recovery policy, that you at least have like put some of the framework in place. It's relatively easy to get a SOC 2 Type 1. You basically just have to sit down and write a lot of these policies and put some of these controls in place. SOC 2 Type 2 is much harder because that requires an auditor to come in and actually do a review of how you're operating over like a 3-month period. So they're going to be asking for, okay, you say you do background checks, but like show me the last 3 people that you hired and that you actually did a background check. You say that if somebody leaves the company, you're shutting off their account within 24 hours. Show us that you actually did that. You say that each person, let's say AWS account is tied to a specific person, not people are sharing passwords and you have sort of like catch-all accounts that anybody can access. Show us that this is happening. They will do a penetration test. They'll have somebody that actually tries to hack into your system. They're going to try to get around your password controls. So that's what the SOC 2 Type 2 is. It's very rigorous, and it is proof that you actually don't just like talk the talk, but you walk the walk. And frankly, that's why in the U.S. this is essentially considered to be a very strong standard in many ways. I wouldn't say the gold standard in the U.S., but it is a dominant standard. GDPR is the global standard for for privacy in particular. So how do you handle personal information? In the US, like SOC 2 Type 2 covers a lot of parts of GDPR. So you might not run into AI vendors in the US that follow GDPR. But a lot of the major principles may already be covered by some of these other frameworks. Now, California instituted their version of GDPR, but it really applies to like bigger companies. But essentially, that's the only place where you find like an explicit privacy standard. HIPAA, I think most of us are familiar with. Anytime we go to the doctor, it's like one of the forms we have to fill out on the intake, whether we're going to the dentist, we're getting our blood drawn, et cetera. And that just means that, we're authorizing that vendor, which is our doctor in that case, to, use our health information for their own purposes. And they're also agreeing that, like, if I want my data to be destroyed, or I need to know how they're using it, they need to be responsible with how they're using it. It may or may not come up as much in a government context unless you have health information in particular running through the systems, which you might if you have like a health department or you're helping people book vaccine appointments or something like that. ISO 27001 and so on. These are more internationally recognized security best practices. Again, there's pretty heavy overlap with SOC 2. So you may or may not see vendors also having this, or they may have this and not SOC 2 Type 2 or GDPR. NIST, this is the National Institute of Science and Technology in the US, an AI risk management framework. Basically, this is not as much a certification as it is a series of best practices that you have said you're following. And again, you can get somebody to come in, an external party. This isn't just, somebody you found off the street or off of Upwork. These are actual agencies. This is their business to come and check that you're actually following these practices. NIST AIRMF goes into like, what is the AI authorized to do? Can it go rogue? Do you have like ethical practices in place? It's a lot of these like best practices for making sure that you're using AI responsibly. I know the GovAI Coalition requires the vendors to post like an ethics statement on the website. We do that as well. This is like next level, that it's not just you're posting an ethics statement on the use of AI, but you actually have a whole bunch of practices in place. And I'll just quickly touch on state ramp, FedRAMP. This is more that you're certified to work with state systems or federal systems. So there are some government technology vendors that have these certifications where their clients can include state agencies or federal agencies. For a lot of the folks that we see when we go to local government conferences, most of those are not state ramp or FedRAMP because that's just not their client base. But if you're looking at obviously like Tyler Technologies and some of the larger organizations, Avenue and so on, they're going to have those. They're going to have those certifications.
And maybe just to add on to that, Anthony, do you want to maybe share a little bit about your background and maybe add on what you're seeing around the expansion of AI companies?
Sorry, thought I unmuted myself there.
We got you.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, everyone, good afternoon. Anthony Jameson here, co-founder and CEO of SipStar Ventures. Yeah, we've been, in this space as originally as an ecosystem convener, um, aggregator of early stage technologies in public sector at the state and local level, making sure that we're bringing all those different audiences together so that we can so that you can understand one another and and see what new opportunities are out there, not only when it comes to innovation, but also when it comes to policies and process. Um, what I wanted to do to add to this conversation, I'm not going to get into all of the technical terms that Chris and Russ were able to eloquently um, explain. But what I wanted to do is come more from the local government decision hygiene angle. How cities and counties can sort through what is not it's prevalent, as the main thing that I'm seeing is the growing AI vendor landscape without getting very buried in those pitches, right? And how to do some of this basic vendor due diligence in a way that protects, because you're, how you all are risk averse to begin with. You got to protect the organization, got to protect your constituents, got to protect, just you got to protect the locality. And so, first, that's why it's kind of hard right now. A lot what you guys are seeing, and what you're not struggling with. What I would say is finding AI tools. Right? There's just an abundance of them. What I'm seeing from a lot of um, municipals is they're struggling with vendor overload and the unclear signal. AI is being used to describe a lot of different things, right? People just say, I go to jump into many conversations, and I'll hear an official say, "We need AI for," and they push it down to, a department or an agency or some leads, and they're just like, "AI for what?" Or we already are using that, or we already have this, and like, can we really like dive a little bit deeper into that, right? So the conversation gets fuzzy fast and early exploration can feel risky. And leaders are really worried about when some of the things around like fairness, um, playing favoritism, and basically opening yourself up for, creating an accidental like procurement exposure, which you don't really want to. So then you layer on some of the things that Russ and Chris were touching on, really with the security and data concerns. It's, you know, it's good. It's really easy to see a lot of these things stall before they even get started. Um, so what I wanted to do is like go really quickly through, some
Yeah,
practical ways. Did someone just say something? I'm sorry.
keep going, keep going.
Oh, yes. Sorry. One, go through some practical ways to approach like what I would say is like vendor due diligence. And so step one would be to start with like an operational problem. Not we need AI. It's like if the goal is we need AI, that again, you're going to get hundreds of demos with no clarity, right? Um, if the goal is specific, like, hey, reduce after hour call volume, we need to improve our multilingual access or streamline our internal workflows, then it becomes much easier to evaluate fit. Um, in government, problem clarity is what I would say a risk control. It allows you to really lower the your the open yourself to risk there. And it keeps the conversation grounded and it keeps expectations realistic. Um, and sorry, Bill, am I going over here
No,
or
no,
doing
no.
it? Okay.
Maybe just to add on with that full circle is, could you talk to maybe some of the resources that, GovI offers to help people with the challenges you're talking about?
Well, yeah, I would like Chris jump in and add a little bit more about what GovAI offers. Yeah, I mean, GovAI is a great organization if you're looking for best practices, frameworks, looking at, some safe, a safe place to test some of these solutions. But I know Chris is really deeply involved, so I can let him touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we're a member of the GovAI Coalition as a vendor. The GovAI Coalition is run out of the city of San Jose, basically out of their IT department. They provide staff and resources. So the GovAI Coalition page and all the resources, that whole hub is underneath. It's basically hosted by the City of San Jose's website. Um, and there are a bunch of committees on use cases and data sharing and different types of like uh, um, uh, basically there's different types of working groups that are chaired by city leaders from across the country. So if folks on the call, if you're not a member of that coalition, I would suggest just going to the website and checking it out. As a vendor, we're sort of just more in the background there. We occasionally are listening in to just hear what some of the conversation is about, what are the concerns of the cities. But they do have a really great resources page. So sometimes when we're talking to clients and they say, we love this technology, but we are working on putting in our AI policy right now just to make sure that we're following whatever internal rules that we've set. And we oftentimes refer them to the GovAI Coalition page where they have templates for AI policy. They have templates for AI governance. These are templates that were not created by vendors. They were created by essentially city officials and experts from around the country through these working groups. It also includes like some use cases for successful use of AI in different parts of government. And it also includes talking points. So if you're going to your leadership to try to explain where AI can be helpful and how to leverage it responsibly and in a way that can be secure and safe for the community, there are talking points there as well. And then the last thing is, which Anthony, to your point, on just the proliferation of AI vendors, and how do you know like who's who in the zoo and who is credible and who literally just showed up but raised some money and is like throwing marketing dollars everywhere to make it seem like they've been around forever, when it might all just be sort of sitting on basically vaporware. How do you know? There is a fact sheet database, and which is now hosted by this company called Fortis, and their platform is specifically called Trellis. So basically, you go to the GovAI Coalition, you can go down to the vendor fact sheet section, and you click into this Trellis platform, and you can actually just click a big button that says Explore the Marketplace, and you can type in a company like Readily. You will see how do we score on accessibility, how do we score on security. And you will also be able to look up like, hey, we are interested in chatbots. We're interested in permitting solutions. And they're still working on their search algorithm to make sure they're surfacing the right solutions for those kind of search terms. But, this is essentially what the GovAI Coalition is now using as their repository for these fact sheets on AI vendors. And those fact sheets tell you what are the inputs for this platform? What are the outputs? What kind of data are they using to train their systems? Is this like a generative platform? So there's a lot of really great information there as you guys are, as our clients and other folks that might be on this call are exploring these type of AI solutions. How do you know that somebody is legitimate or not?
And when it comes to AI vendors, Anthony, do you think experience with AI matters? And what are you seeing?
Uh, I mean, does experience with AI matter? I would say no, right? a lot of times there's AI built into a lot of systems and solutions that many people don't even know. It's just become really top of mind over the last few years and a focus point. But now I would imagine every solution that comes into a government going forward is going to have some type of AI. I think it's almost like a requirement if you're going to be a company, a new startup in this space. You're gonna have to have AI built in. How are you making it cheaper? How are you making it easier for things to move and communicate with one another? Does it need to be? I mean, do you have to have expertise in AI? No. If you don't, that's why you have things like the Gov AI Coalition. You have organizations like ours. Some of these other associations out there, I know like the National League of Cities has like an AI committee, National Association of Counties has an AI committee. Those are places where you can find other um, peers if you're on the public sector side who are tackling these issues. A lot of these people are they have not implemented an AI solution at all. And so they're trying to wrap their head around it. And they go to a lot of these different organizations and resources to help support them. One thing I will throw out there though is when when generative AI took off and then everyone started enacting policies and I mean it became like the Wild Wild West of who can get a policy out to govern like how AI is used, and that can be a double-edged sword, right? Like you don't want people just building shadow ITs and having AI running rampant and taking your data and not know where it is, but you also don't want to like box yourself in when you're not going to be able to use anything, right? Because you've built this firewall of um, of checks and balances now that and no company can meet that those standards to get in, right? And so now you don't have the ability to actually use anything. So I mean, that was a long roundabout way to get to the answer that you're looking for there,
No,
Bill,
it's
but you do not need to be an expert in AI or know how to use AI to implement AI. There's resources and there are probably people in your team that can help you. You definitely need security though, so don't skim on that because you open yourselves up to a lot of headaches down the line if you did not make sure that you at least follow a lot of the things Russ and Chris were sharing on the security side.
that's so refreshing to hear, and thanks for saying that. We get to talk to a lot of we'll be at conferences or on calls with people, and a lot of city officials are like, "Hey, I'm not an AI expert." They're kind of, a little intimidated by it, and it's really refreshing to hear that you don't like. We're kind of all in this together, right? Because it's an emerging technology, and so you don't have to be an expert. There are resources there to support you. That's great to know from a buyer's perspective. Chris, maybe I can ask you as from the vendor's perspective, like do you think it's important to have AI experience as far as like the DNA or experience developing AI? Because we're seeing a lot of companies who have other services or software is not really AI
Yeah,
directed, and everyone's trying to get into it. So can you talk to
yeah,
that a
for
little bit?
sure.
What are you seeing?
Yeah, and I think if I think maybe we had skipped over a slide where I think you had teed up some questions here. If you want to go, maybe it was back one. Yeah, no, you go forward, 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 forward. There you go. Um, yeah, so this is one where it's like, look, at a high level, what are some questions you should be asking your your vendors? And I think we touched on a bunch of these. I know we still have to cover the contracts piece. I can do that right after this for just a couple minutes. Um, but Russ and I were talking about the security piece. So like at a high level, what security standards do you meet and who verified them? I think that's different than are you secure or not? Because if you ask, are you secure? Every single AI vendor in the world is going to say yes. Um, so it's kind of a useless question. It's more about what standards do you meet and who verified that you meet those standards. Or did you just sort of self-attest? what data are you keeping? What city data do you keep, and where is it stored? I think sometimes, uh, a lot of these AI vendors, by the nature of their software, because they're cloud solutions, they do have to store some data. Um, I I would struggle to think of maybe like a payments processor where they're not storing some data, but in the business that we're in, we are inevitably storing conversations or permits or anything like that. So what are we storing, and where are we storing that, right? Is that in the US? Is it secure? And then what are we not storing? So what is it that we either ignore, or what is our system not designed to handle? I think these are really good questions to be asking. And I think just asking these questions will put the pressure a little bit back on the vendor to be able to explain themselves. And if they're struggling, then I think that's a pretty clear sign that they might not be ready to work with cities just yet, right?
And
On
Chris,
the experience side, yeah.
if there's people on the call that aren't experts like you, could you talk to a little bit about what's the difference between security and privacy, and why is privacy so important when it comes to AI and governments?
Yeah, and I think Russ touched on this a little bit. So security is like you're able to protect against insider threats, outsider threats. Privacy is if there's important information, sensitive information going through your system, who has access to it? How do you handle it? Are you redacting, information from your logs? Can anybody of the company log in and see it? Um, you know, are you exposing it publicly? Can somebody go and view somebody's social security number or driver's license number? Are you collecting more information than you need to? If somebody's trying to tell you that they're filling out a pothole, do you need to ask for their social security number? Probably not. So that's a little bit of the difference. And then what happens if there's a breach? What happens if all of a sudden somebody gets access to your logs and they post it on Reddit of like, this is, such and such cities, here are all the residents, here are their birthdays, here are their emails, here are their phone numbers. That's a big deal. So what do you do in that case? Are you going to tell the city that you all of a sudden accidentally released all their personal information? Or if a person doesn't want you to hold their personal information, do they have a right to ask you to wipe it? Do you have an obligation to retain it? What if there's a investigation? So like these are the type of things that are coming up in like privacy conversations, right? Um, and I'll just quickly touch on these other, like, since we're on this slide here. Um, so experience, like who is even responsible at your company for managing privacy and security? Is it just sort of like we all do it, or is there a designated security officer? Is there a designated privacy officer whose job it is? And frankly, as part of these certifications, oftentimes you have to name the person whose job it is to be responsible for these things, right? Um, has
From the
anybody at
vendor
the
side.
company, yeah, on the vendor side, all on
Yeah.
the vendor side,
Mhm.
has anybody even built these kind of systems before? And what we're seeing also in the space is uh, founders that are really excited about the opportunity here. They have a vision. They find a problem that they believe can be solved, and that's great. But they've never done this before. They've never built software. They're outsourcing, building all of their technology. They actually don't even know in many cases who's building the underlying technology. They just know like, hey, Jimmy is like my contact. He's got a bunch of engineers, or Julie's got a bunch of engineers, and they're building it for us. And she just tells us when they're done. So they don't know who is the actual person that's touching the code. Are they building in backdoors and secret passwords for themselves? Are they posting stuff online? Are they using random code that they're finding on the internet, which you can do instead of writing it themselves? Are they just grabbing open source stuff and then putting it into the product? And the founders oftentimes they don't know that because they don't actually know who's building it and how it was built, right? So these are some other really important questions I think cities should be asking. And then the last piece of this is like ultimately, how does any of this stuff work? Like, what AI models are actually powering this thing? Is this just like a chat GPT wrapper? We've seen systems out there that are using like incredibly cheap and low powered AI. And then, their goal is to make this a marketing and sales game rather than a technology game. What happens if the AI doesn't know what the answer is? Is it making a guess? Is it making stuff up? Is it going out to the internet? Is it going to give you a blueberry pie recipe? Is it going to tell you, is it going to give you financial advice? There are AI systems out there that do that, and they're not supposed to do that. So how do you like look under the hood a little bit and ask that hard question of, tell me exactly how this works. Tell me what AI models you're using. When are you using them? How much of this did you build? How much of this is like somebody else's technology that you're just leveraging and kind of repackaging?
I could
And then
use that
how do you
blueberry pie recipe, Chris, just so
Yeah,
you know.
exactly. Yeah, there's some good blueberry pie recipes out there. And then
Yeah.
how do you know that this is working? This is, and I'll not be long-winded here, but this is the thing that blows my mind is like AI is supposed to solve problems. How do we know that it solved the problem? If you're asking it a question and it gives you an answer, how does the city know that that answer was right or was it wrong? And I believe that a lot of vendors right now sometimes are relying on the cities to be that quality control. There is definitely a lot of energy and movement and best practices around there on building evaluation systems that can check to make sure, is the AI working? Like we run regression tests every single night to check that the AI is working and that it's not drifting, it's performing as expected. We've built evaluation systems. After every single session, we check, was the answer right? Or was there something that we need to investigate?
One thing I'll go back on, Chris, under experience, I just thought about it was who's responsible for privacy and security at the company. A lot of these frameworks do require a specific person to be named, as you mentioned, but it's also the responsibility of everyone at the company to
That's right.
understand privacy and security. And a lot of these frameworks and attestations will check to make sure that training is happening with every single employee. And that has to be done yearly. So another reason why these certifications, attestations are great to look for.
Bill, if you'll let me just
That's
quickly
great.
cover the contracts piece and then we can just open it up. I think we can open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, please. What kind of things should people be looking for or asking about when it comes to AI contracting, Chris?
Yeah, I'll just cover these at a high level and of course this recording will be available. And putting it in the contract that the AI does not train on city or county data, that the vendor is not using that data for any other purpose other than to provide the services to that city or that county. So they're not obviously, they should not be reselling that data. They should not be, if they're anonymizing that data and then trying to maybe build bespoke models that they're disclosing that and that the city is approving that. That if there's any sort of anonymization, that's with the full awareness and basically blessings of that city or county. So that's the second one for purpose-bound AI, that the AI is really only supposed to be doing. It's restricted to providing very specific services. That it's controlled. So any workflows, any data that it's accessing, any permissions, all of that is controlled, and that you're putting it in the contract exactly what the AI is supposed to do, and that any workflows or any sort of data sets outside of that the city should be made aware of, and ideally that shouldn't be happening. Human oversight. Last thing you want is for like the AI to go out and like sign a contract on behalf of the city or tell somebody that they're approved for a loan. I mean, that's a lot of the bigger concerns that I think cities are thinking about in these AI policies that they're adopting. There's something called the AI law in Europe that actually delineates level 1, 2, 3, 4 for AI. You can imagine if you have an AI powered ambulance running around that's deciding, do I go to the house fire or do I go to the shooting, and starting to make real life or death decisions? That is very high risk. If you have an AI that is just helping you understand how to fill out a permit, that's going to be basically level 1. But in any case, there should be things built into the contract that allow to make sure that the city is involved in the decision-making process, that the AI is restricted from making autonomous decisions. Data lifecycle, this is actually pretty standard, where are you retaining our data? How long do you retain it? Do we have the right to tell you to delete the data? If we're no longer a client, what happens with our data? Are you deleting it immediately? Are you retaining it for investigative purposes, et cetera? So that should be also defined somewhere in the contract. And then the last one is around security and subprocessors. And we apologize for the typo here. But you should know, I would say that cities should know what security standards is. We talked a lot about these security standards. What is being followed? Is the vendor agreeing to continue to follow those and to provide evidence to the city or the county that they are following those processes? And then they have transparency into any other vendor that they use that might be processing data for the residents, right? So, for example, AWS, if any of these AI vendors, they're built on Azure, they're built on AWS, those platforms process city data. They are processing resident information that should be disclosed somewhere to the city, either within the contract or on a separate list that's maintained, right? If they're using OpenAI, if they're using Anthropic, if they're using Pinecone and some of these other systems, that should all be fully transparent to the city and disclosed somewhere.
And I'll also mention, Chris, that when it comes to sub-processors, a lot of times when companies are going through something like a SOC 2 audit, one of the requirements of that is to list all of your sub-processors and
That's
also
right.
review their SOC 2.
That's right.
So
your sub-processors have to have security certifications. And that's another thing. If you don't have security certifications, then your vendors, if your vendors aren't certified, they could be using platforms that themselves are not certified. So it's not just, do I trust the person across the table from me that they are being responsible with my resident data, and they're telling me they are, but like they may be using platforms that are not secure either. And all of a sudden you have a very leaky bucket. And sometimes these data breaches, if we hear about like Home Depot had a massive data breach, well, maybe it wasn't Home Depot, it was like a vendor that they
supply chain.
used. Yes, part of their like data supply chain.
Yep.
That's a great point.
Excellent. And I haven't seen too many Q&As coming through. I did see one question of somebody that was hoping to see a presentation of Readily. Today's presentation's more on AI security and doing due diligence there. If you're interested in seeing a Readily demonstration or walkthrough, happy to schedule that. I'll just follow up with you afterwards. But please feel free to keep sending any other questions you have through here on the chat. And I think that's all we had covered. Did you want to touch maybe more on this resource, Chris? I know you talked on it earlier, but maybe just as a reminder.
Yeah, what we can do is actually, let me find the link and we can post that into the chat here for the GovAI Coalition. And the reason I talk so much about it is because we didn't write it, right? And I've seen plenty of like AI vendors out there that are like, oh, we'll write your AI policy for you. So I do think it's a really great resource. And it's an objective third-party organization that is run by city officials. Put it in the chat here. I think I can put it in the chat. Well, Bill, I'll send it to you, and if you can post it.
Absolutely. Happy to do that. So the whole audience can share. We'll send out the slides, the recording from today, the link that Chris mentioned. I don't see any more questions. Oh, wait, maybe we have one more come through. Yep, the recording will be available. Thanks for the questions. Well, Chris, Russ, Anthony, thanks so much for leading through a great conversation, really enlightening today. What I'm hearing is that it can be intimidating as a buyer but there are resources. We're not alone. Like we're looking at this Gov AI Coalition, sponsored by San Jose. There are other peers who are trailblazing for us. We can follow in their footsteps. There's also, we have some questions and some things to focus on to make sure we're partnering with the right people, and questions asked to make sure they've done their due diligence on the security side and that they're bringing the experience that we would hope to leverage on our communities. Anything else you guys want to add before we call it a close today?
Oh, good discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chris, Anthony, Russ, and thanks to everyone who joined. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.